Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Daniela Ligero. I'm the CEO of Together for Girls, and I am also a founder of the Brave Movement. Brave Movement is a special initiative that's housed within Together for Girls, and I am the founder along with 14 other amazing leaders who are also public survivors like myself from around the world who started the Brave Movement a little over 2 years ago. So we're still a baby, learning to walk, so to speak, and really wonderful to have so many people around the world who have been excited about the Brave Movement and wanting to join and wanting to be part of this incredible, ever rapidly expanding movement. And I'm joined here by my colleague, Kaylin Weems, who's our membership manager for the Brave Movement, who will be supporting me and supporting all of you in terms of membership engagement. So welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about safe media engagement, and there's several other trainings and webinars that we're organizing for members. Thank you for joining. And if you found out about this, it's because you're already on our lists, and we're really excited to have you here. Next slide. So today we're gonna do some brief introductions, and then we're gonna talk about survivor safety and self-care. This training is gonna be very much geared around public survivors who choose to engage with media. As a reminder, the Brave Movement is a movement of survivors and allies. So you don't have to be a survivor to be part of the Brave Movement. And in fact, many people who are part of the Brave Movement are not survivors themselves. And then you don't have to be public about your experience if you're a member of the movement. Many people who are in this movement have their own personal lived experience, whether directly or with someone close to them, but choose not to reveal that publicly. And I just want to say from the beginning, there is never, ever an expectation that anyone should be sharing anything that's public as a way of being part of the movement. And we have also chosen and work with several people who are survivors, who are public, who have chosen to publicly share their own experiences, like myself and many others, as a way to really drive change. And many of us have been doing this for many, many years, way before Brave Movement came along, and feel strongly that there's just an opportunity for community and building relationships in a way that's really empowering as part of this movement. So I do want to say that, but in this particular webinar, we will be focusing quite a bit on what does safe media engagement look like. We'll talk a little bit about tips for effective communication, and then we'll wrap up. So that is our goal for today. Next slide. So I do want to say that to start us off, engaging with media can be a really powerful way to amplify our collective voice and mission. We're going to talk about some risks and some things that are important to do to prepare for this engagement, but I don't want us to forget that as part of a movement and as advocates who are trying to create change, the media is an incredibly powerful way to get attention to this issue and to create the changes that we want. You know, I've had the experience on working on issues for a very long time and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden there's a story in the newspaper or a scandal or something happens and all of a sudden you get traction on that issue. So it's very important to use media in a way to help move the things we're trying to get changed forward. Next. So I want to pause now and hear a little bit from you. We have some things planned and some slides planned, but I wanted to invite each of you to do two things. The first is in the Q&A, please put whatever you're comfortable sharing. You can do your real name, you could be your pseudonym, and just tell us whatever you want to share about yourself, where you're calling in from, why you're here. Let's start with just a little bit of who you are, and then also what is it that you'd like to get out of this session, why you decided to join today. So I'm going to pause a little. Kaylin tells me the chat should be working, so I want to invite everyone to share anything they want about themselves that they feel comfortable sharing, as well as what you're trying to get out of this session. So I'll pause there, wait for you to type. Hello, Kennedy. We see your chat. Good morning, good afternoon. Just as a reminder, we're waiting to see if anyone wants to add in the chat what it is you would like to get out of this session, why you joined, and anything else you want to share about yourself. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I don't know if people are not able to put anything in. Oh, there we go. All right, we have someone. Okay. Sorry, I'll be more patient as you type. Excellent. So we have someone, Gailina, welcome from Kenya, telling us that there's interest in the work and how she can help. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so we also have Kennedy, who works fantastic on the issue of boys and men and transformative masculinity. Yes, to learn and co-create ideas for mutual good. Fantastic. Welcome to both of you. I'll make sure to try to weave in some of these pieces here. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in being part of this movement. Okay, I'm going to keep going. If I see more things in the chat, I'll just keep an eye on them. Next. So let me talk about survivor safety and self-care to start us off. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about all the good ways in which media can be a powerful way to create change and to make the world a safer place for children, adolescents, and young people, which is eventually what we're all trying to work on. And there are different kinds of risks that are also involved. And so just to think about some of the channels that one might consider using as an advocate, whether you're a survivor or not. Of course, newspapers, TV interviews, podcasts, online news sites. There are many ways in which you can engage with media. And there are a couple of risks that are important for us to always keep in mind. And I just want to highlight a few of them. The first one is that once you say something to the media, it's hard to take it back or to change it. So once something goes out and you say something and a reporter publishes it, it's very difficult to get them to change that or to pull it back. And even if they do, the story's already out there. The second thing to flag is that talking about your own personal trauma and experiences can be made worse by reporters who aren't respectful. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. You could also become a target for harassment, both online and in person. The reality is that the world we live in today, especially on social media, is a place where human rights defenders, people who are trying to work on a particular cause can be targeted by many kinds of different forces, and sometimes in a very negative way. And finally, your reputation might be a risk. You might experience legal action about you. And I'm going to talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail and share some personal experiences as well. So on the first one, on once you say something, it's hard to take it back. I think that's pretty straightforward. And especially if you get the second point, which is a reporter who isn't very respectful. And I think my experience and the experience of several folks who are public survivors is that oftentimes that's the thing that reporters really go to. So over and over again, I've had this experience where I am giving an interview to talk about something specifically. Just as an example, We have a very large conference you might be aware of happening in November of this year, focused on ending violence against children. It's the first ever global ministerial on violence against children. It's being hosted by the governments of Colombia and Sweden, along with several other partners. And it's a real opportunity to get countries, including Kenya, who I see we have people here on the webinar today, to go to that meeting, and we will have government representatives from over 110 countries there to make commitments. And so I've been interviewed a few times already about this, and oftentimes the first thing that a reporter will ask me is, "Oh, I hear you're a survivor. Tell me what happened to you." And I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll say, "And now I want to talk about the meeting in Colombia and what our demands are and what we want to see change." And some people get it, and some people keep going back to, "Who did this to you? How old were you? What happened? Tell me every detail." And there is this kind of, sometimes I think a lot of reporters are not trauma informed and don't really have that understanding that by doing that, not only can that be very triggering for the person that you're trying to interview, but also it's not appropriate if they're letting you know that that's a boundary. But one of the things that I know happens sometimes is people feel like because a reporter is asking, they have to answer and end up sharing more that they would like. And then afterwards, if something is printed about your own personal experience that you didn't want out there and that's out there, it's really hard to take that back. So we're going to talk a little bit more about boundaries later on, but I think that's a really important one. In terms of becoming a target, I mean, that happens to all of us. People will not be happy with the change you're trying to create, depending on where you live, depending on what the issues are. As an example, and I'm glad, Kennedy, you talked about the work with Boys and Men. You know, I have a close friend and colleague who is an advocate, who is a survivor, and he lives in a country where homosexuality is illegal. And he was sexually abused by a man when he was a boy. And so he has to be very careful about what he says and doesn't say about that online, because not only does he risk a lot of harassment, but also even could be technically have committed a crime. And I'm using that in quotations because homosexuality is illegal in that country. So it's really important to understand the risks of where you live, as well as the realities of, for example, the kind of harassment that boys and men can experience if they talk about their own experience, because of, the norms and the stigma and discrimination that still exists in a lot of places. And then legal action, just again, it's important to remember that anything you say can be a trigger. For example, we work with a lot of individuals who are survivors of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. And by talking publicly about their own experience, and, actively naming people in the Catholic Church who, have sexually abused children, have then subsequently been engaged in some kind of a legal action because of everything that's happening with the church, etc. So it's important to understand these risks before you go in. Next. So given all those risks, there are decisions to be made about whether you want to engage and talk about these issues or not. And what we like to say is the single most important thing is to be prepared. Be prepared, think clearly about the risks, understand the risks, and then make a decision about whether you want to go forward or not. Like myself and many others who are co-founders of the Brave Movement, we have all made that decision to be public, and everyone who's a co-founder has been public for quite a bit of time and has made that decision, understanding those risks, as have many other people who are part of our movement. So a couple of things to think about before you decide to speak to the media, or maybe someone you're working with decides to speak with the media and you can help them think through this. It is good to attend a training session led by a communications expert. This means better understanding, for example, terms, and we'll talk a little bit more about that around what's on the record, what's off the record, as well as what I just described, like what we call bad faith lines of questioning, where, for example, a reporter might keep pushing you on sharing personal experiences you don't want to share or asking you to speak about things you don't want to speak about. And so really understanding that you have the right to end the interview at any time, and you have the right to not engage with reporters who are acting in bad faith. Um, for people that we as a Brave movement at a global level are connecting to journalists, etc., we will always make sure that you're using key messages that have been approved and checked. And as our membership grows, there's going to be a lot of members speaking to reporters who aren't connected to us at the global level. So I think in that sense, it's really important to work with whatever organization you're working with or whatever coalition you're working with, whether it's at the local, national, regional level, to really get a sense of what are some of the messages that you all are trying to put out there as part of Brave movement at a national or regional level. And then it's always good to have support from media relations professional and a trauma specialist. And this is during interviews, but it's really before and after interviews. I mean, during the interview. And Kaylin, just to note that we need to update this. You wouldn't necessarily have that during the interview, but when we think about it, it's like before, after, and preparation, and then afterwards for debriefing. Um, and someone who can help with trauma, yeah, can help you with any well-being needs, especially if it was a difficult interview. And someone that understands media can help you navigate some of these pieces around understanding how reporters work and whether the publication is a good faith publication or not. Next. So I want to say this again and again: prepare, 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 before, during, and after, before, during, and after. So a few key things that we like to highlight, especially for people who are public survivors who are talking to journalists. Number one, I already talked about this. Know your boundaries. You have the right, or the person you're working with, if you're here to support someone else, has the right to control how much is shared, what is shared, and how you engage with journalists. I think it's really important, and I'll share some resources with you, to, before interviews, have written down what I call red lines. So if someone asks me about this, here's my red line. I will not answer. If someone asks about this, okay, I'll answer about that. And so really having clear for yourself around your own experience of abuse, or if you're helping someone else their own experience of abuse, what they will and will not share, and knowing that before you go into their interview, so that the moment someone starts to get you to try to cross over that red line, you can say, no, I'm not going to talk about that. And the answer is, no, I'm not going to talk about that. We need to move on. Or if someone asks you something, about your own experience and you want to talk about the conference, you could say, that's really interesting, and I want to talk about the conference. Or if someone says, what have you had for breakfast? And you want to talk about the conference, you say, that's an interesting question, what I had for breakfast, but what I really want to talk about is the conference. So you have the right and the ability to control the narratives and to set the boundaries. The second point I want to make is the safety plan. So we've talked about it already. We've talked about the risks. There are some resources that I want to share on how to develop a safety plan, but it's really important for you to only engage with media if you feel physically and emotionally safe and ready to do that. And you can also have clear who your personal and professional support networks are. And so a safety plan really is around saying, okay, let me think about all the various ways in which I may be at risk. I gave some examples. Legally, are there issues in this country where I'm operating, or this particular piece of work I'm doing, where there might be risks? Are there risks to me physically? Are there risks to me emotionally? How prepared do I feel to talk about these issues? Do I have the supports in my life, whether it's close friends, whether it's a therapist, someone who can help me, who's a professional in terms of mental health? Do I have a community I can go to that can offer me support? It's because we don't want anyone to be engaging with this and feeling alone. It's really important to have that safety plan in place. And then finally, self-care. I think it's really important to remember that the advocacy work we do with Brave on ending childhood sexual violence is not easy. It's not easy for anyone. We're talking about difficult traumatic issues, whether you have lived experience or not. And it's common to have stress or anxiety. So we really encourage everyone to be kind to yourself, to engage in activities that help you relax, recharge. And at the end of the day, you are your most important ally, and making sure that you, first and foremost, feel like you can set those boundaries and you can take care of yourself as needed, in addition to leaning into the resources, community, and support that you might get outside of yourself. So those are the three really important things to think about. And I think the issue of preparation is key. Prepare before, during, and after the interview. What are you going to do before? What are you going to say during the interview? And then what are you going to do after the interview to take care of yourself and to help yourself reach out to community? Next slide. So now I want to share with you some resources. We have a ton of resources that really are described on our website. You'll get these slides with these links as well. I want to walk through the website, but briefly, Kaylin, before we do that, on the website, we also have a specific resource called Preparing for Safe Advocacy, where you can walk through all these questions, and there are a few others as well. But let's go through the website, and I want to show you here. So this is the Brave Movement website. So if you go to bravemovement.org, this is what you'll get. And then if you see at the very top there, I want you to go to Healing and Safety. Thank you. Thank you, Kaylin. Why don't you hover there for a second? I just want to show you, if you go to Healing and Safety, there's several tabs that you can open. One is a Get Help tab. The second is a Resources tab. The third is a Child Safeguarding Policies tab. The fourth is Survivor Sanctuary. And the fifth is Listening to Survivors. I am going to go quickly through the Get Help and Resources one, but before we go there, Kaylin, just for a second, let's stay here for a little longer. We do have on the child safeguarding policies quite very detailed policies on child safeguarding. These materials have been on our website since we launched over 2 years ago. I know a lot of people aren't aware of them, so I want to just flag them. So if you have questions about child safeguarding, you can go there. As a reminder, we do not engage with advocates and survivor leaders who are under 18 at the Brave Movement. That is a red line for us. We only engage with individuals who are above 18. And we know we're working with a lot of organizations that serve children and work with children in service delivery in a lot of different capacities and ask about child safeguarding. So that's why we have those policies there. The Survivor Sanctuary is a partnership with Me Too, where you can go in and they have over 39 little videos, courses, a lot of different resources that are self-guided around healing for survivors and allies. Our Listen to Survivors page has interviews, poems, other kinds of inspirational pieces that have been written by public survivors. You can always submit things for us to post there if there are things that you or someone you know wants to submit. And I do want to talk a little bit more about the Get Help and the resources. So can we start with the Get Help? Thanks, Kaylin. So if you go here, this is a service we pay for at the Brave Movement, and has been, again, around for over 2.5 years now. We have a list of over 180 countries where you can get access to, and those are actually the states, yeah, in the United States. And if you go to the left, Kaylin, no. Yeah, there you go. There are over 180 countries that you can get access to services in. And these are 24-hour helplines. So this is really if someone's in trouble, if someone's struggling, if someone needs support from a mental health professional, or even, let's say, after an interview and you don't have access to a mental health professional, this is a resource where you can actually talk to someone live on a call line or a chat line. So why don't we go to Kenya, since we have a couple of participants from Kenya, Kaylin, just to show. So if you see, when you type Kenya, you can see all the various resources here when they're open. Some of them are call-in lines, other ones you can tap into. Some are open 24/7, some have specific times. So this is just a resource for all of you. And when we're talking about safe media engagement, if you don't have access to a mental health professional, this is a way that you can get access to one. Most of the countries 24/7. Thank you, Kaylin. Can we go to the resources now? So we'll go there. Awesome. So here we have a lot of different resources related to healing and safety. We have some in English, some in Spanish. And if you scroll down, you can start to see there's a lot here. Why don't we click on setting and maintain, oh, preparing for safe advocacy. Let's do that one. Thank you, Kaylin. So I just want to show you each one of these is a standalone resource. So this is a 3-page document that talks a little bit about safety, as I mentioned, thinking about your own safety. If you go to Stop and Act, there's actually a safety and crisis plan that you can develop, and there's a little template for that, which we talked about previously in the training. Yeah, you can keep scrolling down. There's some examples of advocacy, some questions to ask yourself around reflection. Further down, some other additional exercises, and then we have a quote there. So this just gives you a sense for each of these. They're short and sweet. It's like 1, 2, 3 pages. And it really gives you a sense of being able to walk through the exercise yourself, and to, in some cases, we have templates. Yeah. Let's go back to the resources. I wanna, sorry, can we go down just for a minute to the disclosure one? Thanks, Keelan. Public disclosure, there we go. Do you wanna say, we have some guidelines around disclosing your lived experience, and we have them, what happens if you're under 18 or over 18, what you should do. I do wanna say very clearly, we do not recommend, a red line is the first time you share, if you're a survivor, your own experience of sexual violence, should not be with the reporter the first time. So we talk about kind of concentric circles of starting small and sharing with the community of friends, or maybe some of your coworkers, and then maybe doing it a little bigger, like at a closed meeting, or maybe within your broader community, and then slowly expanding those circles. Going to the media is one of those last circles, because once it's printed in the media, it will be everywhere. So it's really important to think about only going to the media once you've gone through those other steps. And we do not recommend having the first time you share more publicly be with the media. However, if you've shared with your coworkers, and you've already shared with some close friends and within some of your community, you might be at a place where you're ready to make that step. Some people are, some people are not, and we should never pressure people into going further. Thank you for that, Keelan. I think we can go back to the slides at this point, but that just gives you a sense of our website and the various resources that are available there. I'm going to pause in a moment and see if there are questions. Yeah, so here again, we talked about preparing for safe advocacy. There's a tool on safe media engagement, online safety, and there's another one on setting and maintaining boundaries, which we've discussed already. Next. So before we do that, let me pause and see if there are any comments or questions, and I'll wait for the chat to see if you have questions or comments before I do a brief little piece on effective communication. Thank you so much, Kayleen. A great question around femicide, including sexual violence early in Kenya this year. Absolutely. And victims were Yes, undignified in various platforms, and how do we deal with their loved ones, who were left to deal with insensitive media remarks, um, and how can people protect themselves? Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I am aware of several cases, including one where, an Olympic athlete was murdered by her partner in a gruesome way, um, set on fire and murdered, and many newspaper articles covered it and saying so and so died. No, so and so was murdered. And so I think what we continue to see, unfortunately, is that the media is really not oftentimes well equipped to deal with these cases in a way that is trauma informed and dignified. I love that word. And it's horrific when that happens. And I think, unfortunately, going back to what I said before, it's really hard to control what media say or what they don't say. What I do think we can do as a community is continue to push back on that and to make it clear as a movement and as advocates and leaders that that's not acceptable, and to push media to do better. And whether that is with open letters, that is whether that's with trainings, that whether that's with putting out statements, which we have done, um, it's really important to do so. Another example is, we put out an open letter on the Brave movement against a Dutch athlete who was a convicted child rapist who was allowed to go to the Olympics. And many people were removed from the Olympics for minor infractions like sneaking out at night from the, Olympic Village, and this individual was allowed to compete. And so we did an open letter, we pushed hard, and in the media, a lot of times this was covered as, he's already, served his sentence. People need to stop complaining. So I think it is really challenging. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I do think there are ways in which we can push back as a movement, again, with open letters, calls to action, and calling out that behavior when it does happen. And unfortunately, it happens quite a lot. Other comments, questions? Indeed, lots of work to do. And if there are ever any cases like that, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help organize as part of our movement open letters that can be signed on from multiple individuals. I think that does make a difference, and it's important for us to continue to do that. Okay, I'm going to jump into tips for effective communication. Um, so this one will be brief, and I think this is really what traditional media training really highlights. But a couple of things that are important to flag whenever you're speaking to a journalist, or if you're supporting someone to speak to the journalist. The first is stick to the facts and what you know. So oftentimes people feel like just because a reporter asks, maybe they should know the answer to something. Um, and it's really important not to, what I say at the bottom there, do not speculate or try to guess. I don't know, but I can get back to you is a great answer. So if you don't know an answer to something, don't try to guess. Um, and don't try to speculate and go into areas that perhaps you don't feel like you know. That's where sometimes people get in trouble, where they say things and then they aren't quite right, and then they're misquoted, or there needs to be a fact check. And so stick to the facts, and what you know is a great way to guide any answers, and do not try to guess. The other thing is to keep your answers simple and short. The longer you go, the more likely it is for a reporter to pick up on something that isn't your main point. So if you're answering a question in more than like 2 minutes, that's a good flag of something's going on there, because you're saying a lot, and then the reporter might pick out something from what you said that actually is completely unrelated to the point you were trying to get across. I've had that happen many times where someone will print something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like not the point of the interview. That was some tangential thing I said early on. And so have some messaging that, again, goes back to the prepare before, like a couple of lines of what is it you want to say, what is the message you want to get across, and say that over and over again, and really try to keep it short and sweet in terms of what it is you're trying to communicate. The other thing we always encourage people to do is also to express yourself in a way that feels comfortable for you. So this is a balance between you have your talking points, you have some key things you want to make sure you say, but you also don't want to come across as like a robot during the interview just reading those talking points. So for example, if you really want to get across that the focus is on passing this new law that will, for example, criminalize child marriage. Let's just say that as an example. You need to keep going back to that. But if you also want to share maybe a personal experience or something related to your context, like in my country or in my city or in my village, X number of girls are married every year, and I know someone personally, or I myself went through that, then you can talk about that and bring it back to your message. I working on this issue of child sexual exploitation and abuse, oftentimes will bring my own experience of, feeling very isolated, feeling very alone, as a way to reinforce the point that we need to have conversations about this and we need to talk to children about these issues, and normalize having conversations about preventing sexual violence against children as a way to make sure that children don't feel isolated, alone, and that they know what to do if something happens to them. I already mentioned do not speculate or try to guess. And the final point I want to make, which I made before, is you control the narrative. And if you're helping someone, make sure they know this. You should never feel pressure to answer questions you don't want to answer. So you control the narrative, stick to the facts, the things you know, keep it short and sweet, don't speculate, and always, always, always know that you can interrupt, stop, or no longer go forward with any kind of interview you're in if you feel like you're being disrespected, if you feel like your boundaries are not being respected. You control not only the narrative, but the actual interview. So prepare before, during, and after, control the narrative, stick to the points, make sure you have a plan in place for your own safety and mental health, as well as for the things you want to communicate. And if you do all those things, being interviewed and and having your message amplified by the media can be an amazing, empowering, positive experience, which has also been my experience several times. Next. So a few resources. I want to take you back to the website, and then we've also developed some very basic media tips for speaking with journalists, which we will share with you as well as part of this webinar. So do we have it on there? Kaylin's going to show us where it is. I think it's just loading. So let's give Kaylin a moment. She's going to show us again back to our website. There we go. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Kaylin. So again, this is the resource that we had discussed with you previously. Please feel free to go to the website and find these at any time. I think we'll go back to the slides, and yeah, thank you so much. Next slide. Yes, again, training takeaways. So you need to decide or help someone decide, is this media opportunity right for you based on everything we just talked about? Prepare before the interview, create a safety plan, identify key messages, and practice self-care. And finally, don't do it alone. Rely on your community, staff, experts, and other resources that we just went through to really make sure that this is a positive and empowering experience for you or anyone you're trying to help. Next steps. As a reminder, we already went through this feature, but there is always this feature if you are not alone, where you can get help or someone you know or care about can get help 24/7 in over 180 countries around the world. Next. Yeah, so let me stop there. And this is the last slide I have. Um, let's see if there are any additional comments or questions from anyone. Happy to address those. I don't see any. I'm gonna wait just another minute in case you're typing and it's long. And in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Um, again, I hope that it was useful. We'll also have a recording to share. I know there are a few other webinars that are being planned, and please feel free to reach out to Kaylin and to our, yes, thank you, Kaylin, to the Brave Movement. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, suggestions, we're always open to any of those. And I hope that our website is also helpful as we continue to add to it. It's always growing, it's always changing and improving. But we're really trying to make sure that around the world, those of you who are doing this important work feel supported and have the resources to help you in your journeys. So I don't see any other final comments. So I'm just going to say thank you all for participating. Thank you for being part of this movement. And I hope to see everyone around. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.